I'm going to show you some frames from a cartoon. Whether you know the cartoon or not does not matter. If you haven't already guessed, this is from the cartoon Courage the Cowardly Dog. These frames were created in the cartoon to give a sense of isolation and the feeling of being alone. At least, as a kid growing up, watching this cartoon made me feel that way. But regardless of my experience, this sort of thing has been shared with many kids growing up, watching this odd cartoon. This gripping feeling of isolation, in the middle of nowhere, with nowhere to go. But of course, this wasn't to be the first experience of this through image. Throughout my journey of the internet, I've seen a lot of weird and odd pictures that just don't feel right or are just disturbing. Photos shot right before a certain death, signifying a captured moment before someone's life is taken. Pictures that are creepy or scary in some aspect, usually being edited like an egg with a mouth or feet for hands. These pictures always felt creepy in some way, or made me feel like I wasn't alone. But until recently, I've never had something pop up in my feed that made me feel more alone than watching that dog as a kid. A painting or picture that was deliberately taken or edited in such a way that makes you feel off or uncomfortable in some way. A liminal space. The word liminal being from the Latin root limen or limen, meaning threshold or transitional. Okay, so right now we are heading to the next shot. Why am I doing a vlog? There's no reason to do a vlog. What are you doing? Okay, anyways. Dwelling into the world of liminal spaces, you can see that many places have been discovered to have this unworldly presence. Feeling that you're the only one. Millions of people on the internet with this newfound urge to find these seemingly odd spaces have captured countless of images of liminal spaces. And some are better than others, of course, but some are so weird that you don't want to stare for too long. We are exploring that realm today, and there are 3 areas in which liminal spaces are particularly found. First, the reality gate. Second, the art gate. And third, the simulation gate. This includes everything you see in natural space, things you see in everyday life. When searching for liminal spaces on Google, this is usually the first thing you see. Long hallways with dim lighting, empty or abandoned buildings like airports or hospitals. Parking lots, truck stops, churches at their hours, or even shut down malls or markets. There's so many liminal spaces in our life that we fail to realize what an actual liminal space is and what isn't. This explanation of fake and real liminal spaces is said wonderfully by the YouTuber Solar Sands in his exploration of liminal spaces. Some people got the impression that liminal spaces just mean nostalgic and creepy places, when it's much more about transitional spaces. This is referring to his other video where he unknowingly added some pictures that were in fact not real liminal spaces. He just thought they were cool. But a very important part of liminal spaces, he stated, was the emphasis on transitional. And in this definition, there are multiple occasions where people seem to confuse the creepy and eerie pictures with the before-mentioned liminal space. Let's take an example. The first thing that screams at you in this image is the stop sign in the middle of the image. It's almost frightening how familiar this image can feel. The copy and paste style houses, the asphalt road with waterways, the odd looking strips of grass on the corners of the 2-way road. chillingly nostalgic.
And if you're at all curious, this is from the 2003 film The Cat in the Hat. Saying it now, it makes sense to see something like this appear in this movie.
It's not a naturally appearing location though. It was made on set. But does that make it fake or not? A difficult question, and I feel as if it would make more sense to call it fake. Because as I stated before, it's not a natural setting on Earth. It's a set for a movie.
Regardless, when I showed this image to my friend, he was immediately in shock. I explained that I wanted to take shots of his neighborhood because his was a perfect example of a liminal space. But the reason he was in shock was because he couldn't believe at all that it wasn't his neighborhood. And that was fascinating to me because it made me realize why liminal spaces were so popular now. It's the nostalgic aspect of these images. It's going back to a time when things were simple and calm, a life of no stress, a life brimming with exploration of the world around us. And it almost seems like yesterday when we were only kids. Take a look at this painting done by Edward Hopper named Nighthawks. This painting was renowned all over America for feeling so familiar and feel as if we could connect to it in some way. And of course, this was in 1942 when this was released to the public. Besides that, it got immense praise for how amazingly it captured the feeling of what was happening. Pearl Harbor had just hit, and many resonated with this painting, feeling isolated, wandering the streets endlessly. There are other works that I take real interest in done by Edward Hopper because of the vibe they give off, and this feeling of isolation, and how great of a liminal space it actually is. With these old paintings, maybe it's the nostalgia that makes me feel this way. It's isolation. Even though I've never been to these places, let alone lived that long, I still feel a sort of somberness when looking at these. I think there's some German word for it. Regardless, Edward Hopper is an amazing artist, no question about that. There is also another artist, Gabrielle Traversat, who is a great example of modern liminal space art. And in fact, she's probably the main reason why it's gotten so popular. And it started with this picture. Or at least, this is the one that got me into liminal spaces. The suburban houses. These chillingly nostalgic images that just inspire some weird feeling. This feeling of isolation. Anyway, let's get back into the images themselves. Lots of these photos have elements that were taken in real life, like these houses and these corridors, these seemingly familiar objects, but they just weren't set in the right spot, as well as having that transitional period. This gives this art its real potential, because you kind of know what's going on at first, but then your whole world is shifted as you look deeper, and a lot of credit goes to Gabrielle Traversat. She makes a whole lot of creepy images and weirdly transfixing liminal space art, and I suggest you take the time to explore her art for yourself.
Now the whole reason why I called it the Simulation Gate was because naming it the Gamer Gate was told to be too dumb and too childish, and how did you get into my house? Don't worry about that last part. Anyways, this gate is going to be including elements from 3D modeling and video games in liminal spaces. Let's take a look.
Now these are some spicy liminal spaces. The long, lonely parking lots, an empty gas station alongside with the empty store with no items inside. Abandoned almost.
These are from Roblox. Yeah.
Regardless of where these images come from though, they all hold the same feeling and title. Take a look at these frames from Half-Life and maps on Gmod. They're usually full of life and or have lots of enemies roaming around, but they are void, an odd space to walk around in with nothing to see, right? There are many instances in these other games too, like these snapshots from the LEGO game series.
There's also games like Portal, a game that never lets you stop and take a break. But tread carefully when you do. You don't want to stay for long. Just kidding. Nothing happens, but it just feels weird to stay longer than intended. Like you shouldn't be there. This is not where you're supposed to be.
We then have the case of photos that were edited and made to look like a liminal space. A 3D model or a photo with a transitional space that was edited to also feel creepy or more isolated. Take, of course, this picture of an abyssal office space. This was actually made in a 3D modeling system and edited to seem like a real place when in fact it is fake. But of course, it is still a liminal space, and what a great one it is.
It's stupendously unreal how many people have joined this task in finding and creating liminal spaces. The community built around just finding these isolating and transitional places is amazing. The nostalgia some may get from seeing these pictures is just such a cool thing to me. And throughout this journey I've taken, seeing how much work is put into these creations and photos makes me appreciate the art and effort into simple things. It makes me smile because I know even in a world of hatred and dark times, we can still come together.